Okay. It was a little crazy. In fact, you'll notice that some of the fonts are not uploaded. We had to completely turn all of our technology to a new computer in the space of the time that we were doing this. And so if you can give us a little grace on that. But the TVs are nice, they're clearer to see, and they're a benefit, hopefully, for us as we try to do things together. That's what technology is for. I think it's for community building. I think it's for the benefit of people and the benefit of our calling, which is to love God and love others. And that's what we've been doing. We've been together this whole month. This is the last Sunday of Together in Worship. And it's actually good in some sense because we can go back to a different rhythm, but we want to be able to remember why we are doing these things, what our core values, what our visions, core values are, and what our vision is, because that's, if you don't remember and double down, life gets so distracting, you just end up doing stuff, and then you find yourself individually and as a people in a different place. So, as Pastor Richard talked about, we really want to grow as family. All right. And as we've been doing, we want to recognize and we want to acknowledge that the younger persons in our midst, they're valuable, okay? So when I was growing up and I was told, just be quiet and be invisible, okay? Younger people, children, yes, you're not invisible. I see you, I see you. We see you. We have such hope for who you're going to become. You're going to be stronger, you're going to be smarter, you're going to be more compassionate, you're going to be better than your parents and better than us. You know why? Because God has such great plans for you that we, your older ones, are going to do everything we can to make that possible. We're going to do our part, okay? And a part of what it means that we see you is that as we've been doing, we've been preparing for you. So little kids get this thing, this binder, along with coloring pages that are different each week, along with stickers. So if you've got your colors, paper, and your stickers and everything, raise your hand. Everybody got everything? Yes. So this is the third week in this month that we've been doing this, so you've kind of gotten used to it by now. But for those of you who need a reminder, you're going to hear somewhere along in this message that there's going to be a sound and a little slide that looks like this. Okay? A specific sticker is going to show up that's supposed to go in at a specific time, and there's a little word that you're supposed to fill in. Okay? So if you need a little help, you can ask your parents. Parents have been doing it for their kids. I've been noticing, which is fine for some of the younger ones. But if you can do it, if you can pay attention, that's even better. Because yes, there are prizes. And once again, we still have a prize for on time. And so I want to give a hand to, give us a shout out to Mark Sheen and Ethan Kim. You guys going to raise your hands? Yes. You know what they've been doing? They've been operating a spreadsheet, writing down every person's name who's coming, picking up a binder, if they're on time or not. Afterwards, they've been distributing prizes and encouraging. They've been doing a great job, okay? So our younger people are stepping in, and they're stepping up. All right. Let's go to the message now. And as we read, there's this verse here that's very familiar to a lot of people. It's a verse that says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. We use this verse a lot, kind of like saying, we need each other to actually make each other, us, better. That by ourselves, an iron sword cannot sharpen itself. But the strange part is, an iron sword or an iron piece of iron that's kind of similar to what it's sharpening has the ability to sharpen the other. Now, for us, we don't really play with swords. We have no idea. This was very common understanding in their setting. If we talked about iPads and we talked about certain kinds of music, we'd be like, oh, that makes sense. But for them, swords were, most people knew about them, how it worked. Interestingly enough, we do too, because there's a show called Forged in Fire. Anybody watch that show? Okay. I'm the only geek in this room who watches this show? Okay. Yes. Thank you. I just outed you guys. It's a very interesting show. It's kind of like those cooking shows like Chopped or Iron Chef, where they've given a specific time frame and they're giving a tough way, a tough task, and it all has to do with forge welding and sharpening and making these knives and swords. And they're given this metal and they have to use all kinds of crazy techniques to hammer into a little square rectangular thing called a billet that eventually, as they make the sword, after they're done making the knife, they actually are going to test it on like chopping coconuts and slicing through salmon. It's a pretty interesting show. Yeah, if you ever get a chance to watch this, pretty interesting show because these guys, they are able to do this within space of 2-3 hour sections. 6 hours, they can take a piece of metal and make it a knife. It's amazing with a handle. It's really stressful as well. And it's actually really interesting to see the different kinds of skills and personalities. But what it is you have to have a real strong working knowledge of metallurgy. And so this is what I realized. They know how to grind, hammer down and grind swords like you wouldn't believe. But actually, they use iron. A sword that's steel is iron with a lot of carbon. And they use other kinds of hardened steel to hammer it into place. And even chefs do this. They use a piece of steel to actually sharpen swords. Anybody have this at home? Okay, I have this at home. I have a better one, but I have to use this sometimes, right? How is it that iron can sharpen iron? It's because one part of the iron is harder than the other. One part of the iron has more carbon than the other, so it's a little more brittle, but it's harder, and it can actually sharpen the softer sword. This is what it's being described as. Similar, and yet one is a little different. And that one that's a little different has an effect on the other. This is a way of describing mentoring. Two people, they're people. Well, maybe it's one little younger, one different background, so on and so forth. But one has the ability to make the other person better, stronger, sharper, more effective. Okay? You do not want a dull sword. You do not want a dull knife. A sharp knife is doing its purpose is what you're after. Here we go. We get to sharpen each other. You can't always just sharpen yourself. Sometimes I do that. I read, I try, trial and error, and that's a good thing to do. But there's such a difference when somebody who has experience, somebody who is more mature, has a different background, maybe is kind of like the hardened steel, comes and rubs up against your life. And they say, oh, I see something in you. Something that I can have an effect to make you better, make you stronger, make you smarter, make you more effective. And that's how it works. That's what mentoring is. That one person sharpens another. Sometimes through the tough part of hammering things in, where actually you are, same thing process is happening. It's iron that's being used to sharpen iron. That's a description of what mentoring is. And mentoring is found all throughout the Bible. Some people look back even to where Moses, who spent 40 years trying to figure out a relationship with God, trying to figure out what he's supposed to do. He's leading 1 million people, and he doesn't know what to do. He gets mentoring from his father-in-law, Jethro. Moses, who receives and learns, and this is an older man, Moses, 80-year-old Moses, learns from his older person, Jethro. Guess what Moses does? With the mentoring experience he has, he mentors Joshua. Jethro sharpens Moses, Moses sharpens Joshua. We see this not only in the Old Testament, we see it in the New Testament as well, where Paul is speaking to Timothy, one who he's been sharpening and continues to sharp, and he says, the things that you heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, the things that you've been taught, the things that you come to understand about God, about yourself, about the world, find people who are reliable, who are willing and able to receive some sharpening, and then entrust that into those people so that they can teach and sharpen others. Do you understand what's going on? Paul is telling Timothy, I mentored you, now you have to mentor somebody else, but as you're mentoring somebody else, they have to be mentorable to other people. It's like this 4-stage mentoring that he's talking about. It's because Paul had a mentor. Did you realize that? Paul, this genius, this apostle, this founder of churches, he needed somebody to sharpen him. And so when he starts going off and doing his mission trips, he goes with this guy named Barnabas, who was somebody who had much to teach. And probably, at least in the New Testament, the most profound mentor there is. Who would want to mentor Paul? Paul knew the whole Old Testament by heart. He was the top mind, one of the top minds in his generation. How can you mentor him? This guy had such confidence. He had such a sense of weight and wholeness that he could actually stand up to this young Paul, and Paul wasn't always teachable. They got in a fight, actually, over mentoring and the value of mentoring this young guy named Mark, who wrote the book of Mark. They fought and Paul went off, but later on, Paul realizes Barnabas was right. And so Paul starts putting all of his energy into mentoring little younger ones like Timothy and Silas and Epaphroditus. Barnabas taught Paul how to be mentored, how to mentor. Paul's telling Timothy, all the stuff that I shared with you and I sharpened you in, look for those that you are going to sharpen so that they can sharpen others as well. Isn't that amazing how focused, how practical this is? In other words, we are never going to be as sharp and as strong individually and as a whole unless we see very healthy mentoring happening. Not just being a mentor, but being mentored, mentoring those who are going to mentor others. It's this plan, this vision and value of mentoring that makes such a big difference, especially in the things that are difficult. If life is easy, if something's very easy, you don't need much mentoring. But if something's very complex, something you can't get out of books or of a YouTube video, you need somebody to actually work with you and point things out to you. We have mentors at work who actually guide you and lead you. They lend you their name and their cachet, and they say, oh, I've been mentored by this, and you name drop, and so on and so forth, right? We have mentors on the playing field where coaches teach these sometimes complex skills, and they draw out the best in the individuals. But now we have life coaches. People actually say, people pay money to tell somebody, tell me how to live well. Yeah, isn't that interesting? And I don't know how you get the credentials to say I'm a good life coach, right? What school did you go to? What things have you been through? But actually, people are realizing it's hard. Even though we've got work mentors, we've got skills mentors, we've got education, we've got YouTube, people are finding that in order to live well, they need others to help them. Because actually, how to live in a way of life, not just simple decisions, but how you really live, who you are and how you live is actually probably the most important thing that you can work on in your life. And when we look at Jesus, Jesus didn't do just skills teaching. He didn't spend their time saying, I want you, this is how you preach, this is how you get their emotions, this is how you actually get into them. He didn't give them all the technique of how to do a miracle. He had them live with him, react with him, see what he was doing, how he genuinely lived 24/7. He showed his disciples a way of life. And that's when he says, follow me. That's what he asks us to do as well. We get to follow the way of life that is Jesus. And it's actually simple, but it's really hard. It's really hard to do it in New York, I can tell you. It's really hard to live the life of Jesus in New York. We need others' help. We need life coaches. Because discipleship is not just about, I know all of this information. I can quote some scriptures. I can sing these songs. I can pray like this. Discipleship is, how do you live? Who are you and how do you live in this world? Does it look like Jesus? The definition of discipleship that we've been operating under is the disciple actually follows the master, does what the master does, and that's Jesus. Not just because they don't know why, but they follow and they do what the master does for the very reasons the master does it. They know who they are, and they do it this way specifically. They've been coached by Jesus and by others to live this way. And I love the way Jesus life coaches, because he doesn't just give them little snippets, 1-hour sessions, and ask them to go ahead and sign up for the next class for money. He actually invites them into everything. Invites them into his joy. Invites them into his pain. Invites them into his even tough days and his great days. We always remember, this is an old stained glass. We always remember Jesus there in this mano a mano prayer, just, oh God, I need you. And this is like this heroic moment where he is in excruciating pain for the sake of the world. But do you see those little disciples on the far right? Yeah, they're sleeping, right? That's their fault. But Jesus invited them, come with me. He tells them, I am sorrowful to the point of death. he's not exaggerating. This is almost a death moment. The weight that was on the pain, the grief that was on his soul. He invited his disciples into his own pain to show them this is how you live. This is how you overcome. This is how you trust God. We need people like that who do that for us, and we need to do that not only for others, but to plan that they can mentor even others. Mentoring involves a lot of different things. Training, motivation, advice, success, direction giving, coaching, support, goal-oriented setting, helping them to set and follow through and accountability. And mentoring is a big thing. It includes discipleship, it includes coaching, and so on and so forth. Sometimes one way to think about it is there's different kinds of, and I had different fonts, it didn't work out that way, but different kinds of mentoring. A formal kind of mentoring where it's kind of like like a Jedi, a knight saying, well, I'm going to teach you, you're my Padawan and I'm your Jedi. Sometimes there's a formal relationship where you actually acknowledge that the whole point of this is to mentor them. But there's also an informal. And the informal is, you don't even realize it, but that person's been mentoring you. Okay? Can you think about somebody in your life? They just saw something in you. They liked you. They thought, oh, you're going to be awesome one day. And I just want to be a part of it. They just stuck around you. And they didn't say, I am your mentor, you are my mentoree. They just poured their life into you. They shared their stories. They brought interest in you. And when you responded, they intentionally poured their hearts and their lives into you. If you've ever had people like that, a lot of times, decade later, 20 years later, oh my gosh, that guy was mentoring me. I had no idea. This lady was mentoring me. I had no idea. I have people in my life like that. I have people that I've been kind of, covert mentoring. They don't realize it. But I've been kind of getting stuck in there and I say, I see something in you. And we don't call it mentoring, but there's an informal process. Iron sharpening iron. Something that you have been hardened in, strengthened in, being made strong in. You can actually go and see another person say, I can rub up against your life. Not as this positional life coach, but I can give you something. I can sharpen you in some kind of way. Formal mentoring, actually there's some really wise things that we've talked about formal mentoring. I'm not going to talk too much here. There's some very smart things to think about. Very clear expectations. Really focusing on the goals and the plans and the track of the mentoree and so on and so forth. We're going to actually develop some of this formal mentoring and try to roll it out in the time of the fall time. So we're working on that. But the informal mentoring is something that we are doing constantly in this intergenerational setting. I don't know if you realize it. Any kind of extended family, extended generation community does this. And we can grow in this. And so what I want to do is give us 3 things to help us kind of move a little in the informal mentoring part. And the first one harkens back to that verse in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. Paul tells Timothy and helps him to realize who and how he's supposed to do this, both formal and informal mentoring. Paul says, the things that you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, stuff that is sound and true, that has been hardened, okay, that you have received, now, look at the word he uses, entrust. Entrust. It's not just proprietary special knowledge. It's a way of life that he's supposed to give, not for his own purposes, but actually to entrust. I love that word. Because when you're mentoring, you are going into a relationship where you are entrusting that person with treasure, something very valuable, something they could not get by themselves, or if maybe by chance way later in life, but it's going to change the track of their life. It's this incredible, valuable thing. Your life experiences, your heart, the way God shaped you, you are giving to another. You are entrusting them. You're not asking for something in return. It's not a contract. It's not some kind of transaction. It's, I am entrusting you. It's actually a little scary. Because one of the reasons why a lot of mentoring does not happen is because when you see somebody who's younger, most people have a hard time saying, wow, I see something really awesome in you. You're going to be a superstar. I just want to be a part of it. Most of the time we look at the next generation and say, you're lazy. You're on the screen all the time. I do that myself. I see people walking and they're texting and they're bumping into stuff and I'm like, oh, this generation, right? It's easy to say, they're not as strong or as valuable, or they're not going to go to places like us. In fact, that's what our parents' generation said. Every generation looks at the next generation and say, oh, you guys, you got to grow up. You got to grow up. But in fact, we don't have the mindset to say, you're going to be somebody amazing because I know God is going to make you that way. And so I'm going to, before we see it, by faith, entrust this to this person. And it's not a gamble, but it is a risk. That person might not fully receive it. That person might not fully respond to it. But that's how it works. To see somebody else and be willing to say, I'm going to give you the treasures of my life, and I'm going to entrust it to you. And the person who's receiving it, the mentoring, has to see it like that too. The mentoree is not like, okay, yes, whatever you say. It's not a power relationship. It's actually one built on trust. Where if somebody's entrusting something to you, if I entrust you with my house keys and my car keys, right? There's relationship. I don't usually do this to a stranger. There's both relationship there and one that's going to come to being. The person who receives has to be reliable. They have to step into the mentoring situation with an open heart, with an open mind, and saying, I will not only just say, sure, fine, I will really receive and guard, and not only guard, but be ready to make it mine so that I can give that away too. This language of trust, I think, is so significant in a mentoring context. So how do you build trust? If you look for the younger ones, maybe you're in your 20s and 30s, do you have somebody in your 40s and 50s you're like, oh, I can really trust this person with my deep, dark secrets, with my frustrations, to trust them to actually not tell me what to do all the time and be like my parents, but actually, or have expectations that are theirs. I can trust them to really shape me well. Do you have that? If you're in your 40s and 50s, do you have somebody that you look and say, I'm willing and wanting, I feel a tug to just entrust stuff that I learned through tough experiences, tears and pain. I'm going to give it to this person so that they not only don't have to go through that, but they can actually build on it and give to others. I think that's a great way to begin to start thinking about mentoring, both formal and informal. Second, I think we have to continue to learn about how do we find moments to teach. And parents are always looking for this, right? Something happens, and instead of just going off and saying, oh, you didn't follow the rules, and going into behavior control mode, if you're a good parent, you actually take time out and you do a how. A little child says, Mommy, can I help you? It's like, no, I'm busy. That becomes a teachable moment. Okay, let me show you how, because one day, you're going to be doing this and more. A father can say that to his children as well, right? But the problem is, we do the hows sometimes, but we don't do the whys. Sorry, the font's all off, that's why, okay? We don't do the whys, okay? Why do it like this? Why are we putting our energy here and not there? We don't emphasize our vision and values enough in our community or even in our families or in our mentoring relationships. We can sharpen their skills, but actually the point is to sharpen that person in Christ. If you know why you are doing something, guess what? You have a lot more clarity and energy and passion to do it. And if everybody asks you to wax on, wax off, oh, that Karate Kid, I can say this because they made a remake, so some of the younger ones can remember what the story is about. This mentor tells his mentoree, Kung Fu mentoree, just wash my car, but do it this way. And then wash it this way. Do it this way. Wax on, wax off. Paint my fence by brush up, brush down, brush up. And he's doing this day after day, and he's so frustrated. He knows how to do this really well now, but he didn't know why until the mentor taught him the why. As you were doing this, it got into your muscle memory. Now you can do your Kung Fu this way, right? I think that's something that we forget, that our mentoring falls short because we don't go as far as the why. Right. Sorry, wrong sticker. Didn't get around to that. It's the sticker with it's apple. Why do you think it's the apple? There's a little puzzle here. Is it an apple or is it something a little more? An apple that is not eaten or eaten? Eaten. What can you see? What's in the middle of an apple? Yes, who said it? Core. It's in the core. That's where the seed is. That's where more apples are made, right? Are apples come out from the skin? From the core. So if you get to the core values, the things of what you're doing and why, you can make more apples. In our mentoring, we have to get to the core values. And it takes longer. You have to ask the questions so that they understand, oh, and they have to ask you questions. And we have to go from there, okay? All right. Last one. I think one of the more powerful ways to teach values, to actually share in such a profound way, are stories. Because stories, when they're shared well and when they're listened to, they stick with you. I remember every story my dad told me, even the silly, goofy ones. I'm like, why are you telling me this story? It makes no sense. I remember these stories. I remember the stories of my mom growing up in Korea and all that she faced. I remember the stories of my mentors. They told me what it was like to be a young pastor, what it was like actually to be a young husband and a young father, what they suffered and what they learned and how God was with them. These stories that you have, but also other people have, they're like treasure. Find an older person and just sit down and spend an afternoon and just ask them about their stories. You'll be surprised how relevant they are, especially if they've walked with God. You'll be surprised how God will use that as you remember them. It'll come back to your mind. Not just to laugh at, but actually it'll teach you about this is how you live. They're mentoring you with their stories. You can mentor with your stories. So become better storytellers, okay? All parents have to learn to be better at storytelling. But as you practice it, this is not just some fake story. This is real life, enfleshed in such a way that it can be passed down. We can grow as a community in being able to share our stories. Because we're never going to be fully sharp until, as iron sharpens iron, somebody who's been tempered and strengthened and is harder can rub up against somebody else's life and improve them. Make them not just better, but actually make them more like Christ. Make them more mature. Show them how to live well in their thought life, in their head, and in their emotional life, and also in their service, and in their life through the hand. Let's pray.